some African officials, saying elephant overpopulation harms their communities, called to lift the international ban on ivory trading and culling elephant herds.
Women farmers find an ally by supporting female farmers growing rice and maize. The Nigerian group works to address food crisis and improve the lives of women. Hello and thanks for tuning into the show that goes around the continent to bring you stories near and far. I am Chamberlain Uso at Channels Television here in Abuja. I'm joined by Linoch Mudu from Voice of America in Washington.
Thanks. I'm Linoch Mudu at the Voice of America. Happy to be with you again for another edition of Africa 54. Let's start off with the latest from Nigeria. Shambali Nuso in Abuja brings you that story.
A group in Nigeria has taken up the task of supporting female farmers. The group believes this will go a long way to address food crisis and improve the livelihood of the women. Channels Television's correspondent in Kwara State, Abdul Hakim Garba, and his counterpart in Niger, Abdullahi Omar, visited some cluster farmlands where participating women cultivate at least 125 hectares of rice and maize plantation.
Riding over land and sea, you arrive at Egbanti community, Kacha local government area of Niger State. Egbanti is one of the communities housing 35 hectares of land strictly for rice cultivation. Interestingly, all are managed and cultivated by women, 70 of them on this piece of land. This program, an intervention by a group with special focus on women under the name tag Harvest and with support by the USAID. Harvest is an NGO with focus on smallholder women farmers in Nigeria. The group says its target is providing agricultural financing, inputs, training and access to premium markets for small-scale female farmers in Nigeria. Some of the beneficiaries are counting their blessings from engagement in the program, which is aimed at cutting across the African continent.
Before, if I see farming, I always think it's not something good, but since when I start living in the village, so I experience some things from farming. Because farming is also good for women too, like us.
Before, I never put my children inside school.
This program assisted me with getting money to enroll my children in school. Now, I eat well and pay my bills and live comfortably.
I enjoy my life.
The program handlers cite creation of balance and gender equality as one of their motivation.
Because in those days, agricultural interventions only focuses men and other things. They neglect women. So right off, this project is putting in mind the ladies only, so that they can be lifted. Also, so that they can compete favorably with their male counterparts.
Over in Kwara State, this 50-hectare maize cultivation in Omuaron is managed by 100 women, since it's 2 women to a hectare. It's minds at work for these women who are confident of tackling food crisis, aiming to produce strictly for local consumption.
I went into agriculture because of the passion I have for it. I left my job. I was just 16 years in service. When I look at the way men are doing, they are doing their own farming. They are not helping the masses. They're doing commercial and taking it to other country. But now, when I look at it, I say if women can come together, we can make it. Masses will have a lot to eat on their tables.
They are worried by the paucity in rainfall, praying for the rains. The 40-hectare rice cultivation in Kujitagi, also in Kwara State, is set to cater to 80 farmers. At the last check, over 10,000 female farmers are reportedly empowered in Plateau, Kaduna, Niger and Benue states.
Women are in charge of the project here. So the participation has to be, the participation is in the sense that women control both the labor, the the input usage and in terms of the harvest.
With support from USAID, Kwara State Government and Smallholders Women Association of Nigeria is certain of taking this program to women in other states of the country soon.
Sholakwe Akinpelu is in our Lagos studio to tell us more on that program. Sholakwe is the CEO and co-founder of The Harvest. Well, Sholakwe, could you tell us what gave birth to this intervention in the first place?
Thank you so much, Chamberlain. In the first place, as you said, it's a case, Harvest is a story of how we could ramp up women's financial inclusion and access. And that came from insights gained while I was working and marketing for financial brands for over 12 years. So I realized that women were not adopting financial services, and then it was underwhelming them. But we quickly realized that we cannot talk about financial inclusion and access without economic empowerment. And looking at the AFDB numbers about the $42 billion economic gender gap in Africa, about 36% of it is trapped in women in agriculture. So it was natural for us to look at what was holding women in agriculture back. And we realized that a lot of them are being held back due to lack of funds, capital, lack of farming best practices, and then because they lack access to competitive markets. That's what Harvest is solving for these women. We bring forward blended financing for the women farmers who make up about 70% of the total agricultural population in terms of labor in Nigeria. And so far, we've worked with about 25,000 women in our community, ensuring that these women get access to timely, funding, farming best practices, and of course, connectivity to competitive markets.
It appears it's only women from the north who had benefited from this project since you started. Any plans for female farmers in the south?
Well, that is largely because the women, the northern part is where we have the bulk of these women farmers. And of course, because of the digital divide and the access, gap as well, we have more farmers and then, of course, consequently more female farmers in the northern part. But again, we are held back in spreading because of, access to funding, access to, human resources too, which still comes back to funding. So we would like to expand because it's a continental challenge that we're solving, starting with Nigeria to start with. But we would rather deepen than spread ourselves so thin and then reduce the efficiency, of the Harvest solution.
And speaking of which, are there conditions that you're looking out for in order to get more partners?
Yes, we are constantly seeking for partners. We are solving for a continental challenge that has held a lot of women back due to patrilineal institutions, and some challenges that had reduced women from getting enough access, to even financial interventions in the agricultural sector. For instance, it might surprise you that the 70% of women get access to only 10% of the funding, that is structured funding that comes to these sectors because they lack the social permission. So talking about partnerships, we look for strategic partnerships that can help us scale the solution. At the moment, we currently work with the USAID. Thankfully, we've worked with the Kwara State government and even the Smallholder Women Farmers Organization of Nigeria itself. But we're constantly on the lookout for partners that will help, scale up the underwhelm that is affecting the entire agricultural sector as a whole. Because when you have 70% of your labor population underwhelmed because they lack access and inclusion, it affects everybody. So it's an imperative that we work with strategic partners that can help us scale funding, access, and resources required for Nigeria's largest contributor to our GDP.
Well, you've highlighted some funding challenges. Could you tell us at the moment, who bankrolls you? Who funds the activities at the moment?
Well, at the moment, we work with banks, right? That is, on the debt side, because our funding is actually bifolded. So we need funding for our operations, and then we need funding for the debt that we match as credits to these women. So the banks, and of course, peer-to-peer on the Harvest mobile applications, which is downloadable, helps to take care of the debt side. But for our operational expenses, we have some, investors, individual early-stage investors that have taken interest and funded. But because as the scope increases, we need more funding partners so that we can, as you've asked before, expand this to the entire nation and scale the solution. So our funding is bifolded, but we significantly need to scale because we're looking at about 12 million smallholder female farmers here, and we've only worked with less than 20. So you agree with me that we've barely scratched the surface, and we need to strengthen, of course, our food systems and food security. So we keep saying Africa will feed itself, but how much, are we stimulating into this sector in a sustainable way, like the harvest way?
All right, then, Sholakbe Akingbelu, thank you for your time on Africa 54.
Thank you for having us, Chamberlain. It's a pleasure.
Ethiopia's government and the rebel Tigray People's Liberation Front, or TPLF, are preparing for peace talks to end the conflict that broke out in November in 2020. In the town of Abala, badly damaged by the conflict, militiamen and locals say they are ready for peace, but analysts say it won't come easy. Henry Wilkins reports from Abala, Ethiopia.
Abala is largely a ghost town, following intense fighting in late December. Residents say Tigrayan forces fired at civilians from this ridge overlooking the town. Most residents fled, but since forces aligned with the Tigray People's Liberation Front, TPLF, left in April, a handful have returned.
People are not afraid of war, but of famine. There is nothing to eat, and there are no markets or shops. There is great fear at the present time of starvation, and many families return to the town in confusion, not knowing what to do because of the lack of basic services in the city.
The residents say they're afraid of unexploded bombs too. 2 boys showed VOA these munitions they found left in their home. Many people VOA spoke to in Abala and other surrounding towns said they did not care about the politics between the Ethiopian government and Tigray. They just want a return to normal life. Both sides have indicated they're ready to negotiate an end to Ethiopia's 21-month internal war. In June, the Ethiopian government said it had set up a committee for negotiations. Tigray has said it is doing the same. A TPLF spokesperson told VOA, however, he is no longer optimistic that talks will take place anytime soon.
I cannot say that today, because at that time, we were told by interlocutors, countries like the United States, the African Union, all of them, that basic services will start any minute now. We were counting not days, but hours, that there will be some move. Now, it looks like the Addis Ababa government have decided against it.
The government has cut telecoms, banking services, fuel supplies, and prevented humanitarian aid from reaching Tigray. Analysts agree peace talks are unlikely to go ahead if these basic services are not restored to the region. But even if that happens, there are still obstacles to overcome, say analysts. One is the size of Tigray's army and its ability to wage war against the government.
It's not clear that Tigray's leadership or its people would be willing to accept the downsizing, let alone the abolition of that force. But equally, it's not at all clear that the federal government would accept Tigray to become a fully functioning part of the federation and its political system, whilst it was still in possession of such a large and capable fighting force.
The TPLF has indicated it could try to secede from Ethiopia and form an independent state.
I think it's not a realistic option. We can simply take even Eritrea and practice. Eritrea left Ethiopia some 3 decades ago, and what it has been through is not as such, praiseworthy.
Analysts also say which side takes control of the disputed region of West Tigray will play a major role in negotiations too. The Ethiopian government did not respond to a request for interview. Henry Wilkins for VOA News, Abala, Ethiopia.
It's time now for a short break, and as we do, we remind you to visit our website, channelstv.com, for news and programming around the clock. You can also find us at youtube.com/channelsweb. Still to come, a clash between humans and nature in Gabon. As farmers suffer from elephant raids on their fields, public support wanes for environmental concerns to protect the species.
Welcome back to Africa 54. I'm Linoch Mudu in Washington. Some African countries with elephant populations say they want to lift an international ban on ivory trading and culling elephant herds. Representatives meeting at the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species in Zimbabwe in late May said elephant overpopulation is harming communities. Columbus Mavunga has more from outside Hwange, Zimbabwe's largest national park.
That there is need for...
Some 14 African countries say they want communities with elephant populations to benefit from them. So they issued a communique after a 4-day conference in May asking for a ban to be lifted on ivory trading and elephant killing. The group plans to take that message to Panama in November for the Convention on International Trade in Endangered Species, or CITES, an agreement between governments to ensure that wild animal and plant species are protected.
Mainly to say, as African states, we hold the significant population of our elephants. It is therefore important that the ideas, the proposals that we are preferring at CITES need to be taken seriously. Key among them, issues of our wildlife products.
Zimbabwe says its national parks are home to nearly 100,000 elephants, double the number parks can comfortably accommodate.
They're troubling us, invading our fields, invading our homes. We can no longer farm in our fields because of the elephants. So we're asking for the relevant authorities to erect a fence so that elephants cannot cross to this side.
But some African countries, like South Africa, which is home to 45,000 elephants, are against lifting the ban. Officials there say South Africa uses birth control to manage the population and boundary fences on national parks to reduce human-wildlife conflict.
One of the difficulties is people tend to think that the African manager of wildlife has got only one solution. In fact, they don't. They go through some very serious thinking about what can I do before they get to the really hard, difficult ones that now I have to permanently remove an animal.
The European Union opposes lifting the ban on elephant ivory trading and questions the data Zimbabwe used to estimate of its elephant population. Zimbabwe accuses the European Union and other Western countries of influencing CITES to keep the ban on trading ivory, which was implemented to protect dwindling numbers of elephant species from poachers. The ban has encouraged the growth of elephant populations, but it is also causing problems for people like Sibanda. Columbus Mavunga for VOA News, Hwange, Zimbabwe.
Forest elephants are smaller than their cousins on the African savanna, but in Gabon, their violent raids on farmers' fields is having an outsized impact on public support for the government and its long-running environmental agenda. A study published in Global Ecology and Conservation in December showed that Gabon is home to a stable population of over 95,000 forest elephants, or an estimated 60 to 70% of Africa's population of the unique species, which is facing dramatic declines in other parts of the Congo Basin, partly due to habitat loss.
With over 10% of its land protected in national parks, Gabon has become the main stronghold in Central Africa for critically endangered forest elephants, whose relative abundance and maroonding habits are now undermining the policies that help protect them. Just outside the capital, Libreville, splintered tree trunks, trampled undergrowth and churned up earth mark where an elephant strolls through the jungle. When they draw close to villages, these natural bulldozers can wipe out carefully tended crops of maize or cassava in just a few hours. This has led to deadly human-elephant encounters and generated thousands of written complaints to the authorities from rural communities in recent years.
That causes problems because villagers feed themselves from those plantations. And when the elephants eats all this, something I have been for months, and that will give me food for my children and all this, the elephants in one day, only one day, it destroys it. Something that could last for me and my parents maybe 1 year, it's just vanish in one day. You see how people get mad and sometimes kill the elephants.
Up to 50 elephants are killed every year in revenge or self-defense, while around 10 people have been killed by elephants in the past 2.5 years. And that's according to the Environment Ministry, which says there's not yet enough data to quantify long-term trends. To fill the knowledge gap, the ministry this year launched a database and app to track and verify elephants' disturbances. Under a previous system, part funded by the World Bank, over 8,370 written complaints about elephants were recorded between 2016 and 2020.
The human-elephant conflict in Gabon is a growing and serious problem for rural people. Some people cannot farm anymore. The elephants are eating so much of their crops. And so if we cannot provide protection to those people in the form of electric fences, we have the technology, it's just a matter now of money to build the electric fences to protect people's crops. When we protect people's crops, they say, we're fine with elephants out there, we're fine seeing the elephants from our village, as long as they don't come in and eat our crops.
An association of women farmers in western Gabon say elephant raids were causing food prices to rise, spurring rural exodus and driving up perceptions that the authorities prioritize elephants' interest to support the around 1/3 of Gabonese who live in poverty. The public outcry has recently pushed the government to take unprecedented steps. For the first time, it has set aside $4.5 million in this year's national budget to compensate farmers for trashed crops. It's also allowing charity space for giants to trial elephant-repelling electric fences that have been customized to simplify their installation and maintenance in dense tropical forests. Compared with the multi-strand fences common in East Africa, this single length of electrified wire are strung between stakes or trees and can be easily moved to accommodate rotational subsistence farming practices, according to the SFG, which plans to install 80 fences across Gabon by the end of July and 500 by the year end if it can get the funding. The 57 fences set up so far have registered 44 interactions with elephants, of which all were repelled.
It seems like they seem to be working. Of course, it's early days because elephants are smart, and what might keep them out of a fence now as they get shot, they can eventually learn to get around if they really want to. So I think that there's a great promise, but at the same time, it needs to be followed over time, and we need to be careful about that.
The fences are not a silver bullet, and the authorities will need to do more to help communities live alongside elephants long term and support the authorities' conservation goals more generally. Gabon's relatively untouched share of the Congo Basin rainforest makes it one of the few net absorbers of climate warming carbon dioxide and haven for other endangered animals. White hopes to generate more revenue from this through carbon credits, sustainable forestry, and high-end sustainable tourism.
Two sisters in Libya have taken it upon themselves to provide shelter and food for homeless animals. They believe all animals have the right to a good life and decided to raise awareness.
Libyan sisters Ibitsam bin Oman and Arabia drive their car every day to reach more than 150 dogs and cats who they feed in Benghazi. Their story with animals started during the war, when dogs and cats used to flee bombs and bullets.
Smart, okay.
This is when they decided to establish a shelter for homeless animals and had to sell most of their belongings to afford the food and medicine they needed.
We founded the association 3 years ago, aimed at raising awareness of the animals' right to a good life. We bought parcels of land under the name of the association, but we did not get the needed support to build them, and we sold our houses and cars in order to spend.
They still have major difficulties in supporting the animals, some of whom are injured and in need of medical attention, while others are paralyzed.
We face major difficulties in getting the food because we feed 100 to 150 dogs every day and 50 cats. Most people here are not cooperative or helpful. Only few are. We asked restaurants for help, but unfortunately, none supported us.
The two sisters, who are just few years apart, bond with the animals in addition to caring for them.
And that's our show for today. You can find all the continent's top news and world news online at voaafrica.com. Check it out. I'm Linor Mudu in Washington. Channels Television has our last word from Abuja.
Well, thank you, Lenore. We look forward to bringing you another show next week. Remember, channelstv.com is your source for news and other programming. I'm Chamberlain Osar. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.